Hi clay friends, today we're going to make some creatures out of coils. Some things that will be helpful for today's lesson are going to be a piece of clay, about a half a pound, like a giant egg size. It should fit in your hands pretty comfortably. Some sort of either a sharp stick like a skewer, or you can use a paper clip, unwind the paper clip, and that'll make a little tool. And it might be helpful to have some toilet paper rolls. We're going to lay the coils over those maybe to shape them. And that's really about all that we need for this particular lesson. So I'm trying to make these critters with as few tools as possible and trying to keep it to things that you can just find around your house. So that's our goal for today. So we're going to take a half pound of clay here and we're going to roll it out into a big coil. I like to start by squeezing it, because the natural shape of your hand is kind of round when you squeeze things. So if I start just by squeezing it and move my hand down the clay back and forth, I'm going to start to squeeze it into a long coil shape. And then when it gets down to looking like a little bit more manageable, I'm going to roll it out on a hard surface. So you can see it kind of elongating as I squeeze it. It gets longer and longer. So I'm squeezing it. The clay doesn't have anywhere else to go other than to make it longer and longer. So we're already starting to look kind of like a snake or something. So when you get it down to about like this, then we can start rolling it on a hard surface. So I'm going to roll it back and forth. And when I roll it, I like to make sure it's rotating several times, rolling over several times, not just back and forth. If I just went back and forth like this, it would get flat and kind of more of an oval, and I want to try to keep it round. And I like to move my hand up and down the coil. That helps elongate it too. And every once in a while it does start to flatten out sometimes. That's okay. You can pick it up anytime and just squeeze it again. Squeeze it back into more of a round shape. And that's also going to make it longer. Roll some more. And this coil, we're going to make a sea serpent, so I'm going to leave it kind of a little bit fat. Also, I'm going to leave it, I want it to be fat on one end for a sea serpent head, and I want it to be skinnier on the other end for the sea serpent tail. So it's going to be like a really long carrot. So think of a giant long carrot, skinny at one end and thick at the other end. So to make that happen, when we're rolling it like this, we can put a little bit more pressure, just press a little bit harder on the end that we want to be skinny. So its tail end, we're going to press a little bit more until we get something like this, skinny down here for a tail and fat up here to make into a head. So I'm going to set this aside just a second. And now I'm going to get out some toilet paper rolls and we're going to lay it over toilet paper rolls to make a shape to it. It's helpful, it might be helpful if you can find maybe a cutting board or something to set it on, even a piece of cardboard or shoebox, something like that. So if we take a couple toilet paper rolls, 2 or 3, you can pick, it's your sea serpent, so you can decide how you want it, and get some sort of board to set them up on. We're going to lay them down and we're going to use them to put our coil over, and that's going to give it a shape. Now, if this size seems too big and you want a different size shape for your sea serpent, it's really easy just to cut your toilet paper roll straight down like this, and then you can squeeze it into a narrower one, and then you can have different size curves in your sea serpent so that they're not all the same size. And that's up to you. It's your sea serpent. It's going to come out of your imagination, so it's going to look however you want it to look. So let's take our little coil guy here, and we'll start with the tail end. I'm going to prop the tail end up over one of our toilet paper tubes. And then we're going to give him a curl in the middle here, like that. And then we're going to use a toilet paper roll here to prop his head up a little bit. Okay, so this is what we have so far. We have a long coil, and we're going to lay him over some tubes to give him a little bit of shape. So what other kind of crazy things might a sea serpent have? If you shut your eyes and imagine a sea serpent, what does he look like? I'm gonna start with a little face on mine. So I'm gonna squeeze this end that I left a little bit thicker. I'm gonna squeeze it narrower here and kind of build up a thick part to make a head. So we're gonna squeeze this And the sea serpent that lives in my imagination looks a little bit like a snake. So I think I'm going to make a kind of snake shape. So I'm going to pinch some cheeks out a little bit here. Give him a little bit of a nose there. So it's coming to a little bit of a point. I'm using my fingers and I'm squeezing a little bit of a point there. And then this stick that we can use to cut shapes, or we can use this round end to poke in some little places for eyes. So I'm gonna put some holes for some eyes right here. And then I think sea serpents also have little nostrils, the ones that live in my imagination do. So I'm gonna give him some little nostrils right down here. Okay, is that starting to look like something, anything? Let's see, my sea serpent has some kind of floppy ears. So I'm gonna give him some floppy ears, and my sea serpent has a big tongue. So I'm gonna make him a big tongue here. So with some of our scrap clay that we have laying around, just a little bit of a piece here, we can take a scrap of clay, and I'm just gonna use the palm of my hand to flatten that out. And I'm gonna flip it over and flatten it out a little bit more. So I have a pretty thin piece of clay here, and then I can cut some shapes out of that. So I'm gonna cut 2 ears to attach right here. And the ears are just gonna be triangles. So I'm gonna cut 2 triangles for my ears. Okay, so here is triangle number 1, pretty little, just a tiny little triangle. Then I'm gonna lay this triangle back down on my scrap of clay here, and I'm gonna trace around it, and that way both the ears come out the same size. So here's triangle number 2 we're gonna cut out. Okay, so now we have 2 little ears, and then I'm gonna cut out a tongue, and I'm gonna give him kind of a forked tongue. So I'm gonna cut a long tongue and make little forked at the end of it here. So my sea serpent is going to have a tongue that looks something like this. So to attach these, I'm going to use just a little bit of water. I'm just going to dip my hand or my finger, just a teeny bit of water. This clay is really soft, so hopefully your clay is really soft too. If your clay starts to dry out, you can take the bag and just sprinkle a little bit of water on it to get it wet again, or when you store it overnight, sprinkle a little bit of water on and seal it tight in a bag, and it should keep it moist so you can make other projects out of it. So I'm going to take my 2 little ears here, and I'm going to pinch the edges and make the edges look like they're a little bit thinner than they really are, but the middle's still kind of thick. I'm going to bend the ear a little bit, and I'm going to get the bottom wet, and then I'm going to use the end of my stick here to attach that. So I'm going to give his little ear back here. I'm gonna try and get this closer so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so we've got our ear here. I'm going to use the stick to blend that. So I'm attaching it by dragging some of the clay from the ear. I'm going to dip my stick in water a little bit. So I'm attaching it by dragging some of the clay from the ear down to the head. And that's what's going to make it stick. So you want to keep blending it until you can't see a line there. You don't want it to look like there's 2 separate pieces of clay. You want it to look like it's all one piece of clay. If you can still see the line there, then that means it might crack back apart. So if you want your ears to stay on, just keep blending it with your stick until there's no more seam so you can't see that line. So I'm going to do the same thing with our second ear. I'm going to pinch the edges so the edges look like it's a little bit thinner than it really is. Leave it thick in the middle, bend it a little bit. And I'm going to dip my finger in water and just get the bottom a little bit wet, because this clay is super wet, so it should just all stick together without too much fuss. So same thing, I'm going to use my stick here, and I'm going to drag some of that clay from the ear down to the head and blend it until it does not look like 2 pieces of clay. It looks like it's all one piece of clay. And then you get our little ears on, then you can decide what kind of face do you want your sea serpent to be making. You can leave his ears up, you can flop his ears down, play around with different shapes of ears and see what kind of different expressions he makes. If you want him to be a nice sea serpent, or an angry sea serpent, or a curious sea serpent, you can make all those things just by changing around his ears a little bit. Okay, gonna do the same thing with our tongue. So we have our forked tongue here. And I'm gonna dip my finger in the water and get it a little bit wet here. And we're gonna attach that right down here to his mouth. And I'm gonna use the stick again. I'm gonna go underneath here and I'm gonna blend that tongue really, really well. I'm gonna adjust that toilet paper roll there so that it's laying on there. So that'll support it while it dries. All right, so far we have a forked tongue and some ears, and we have some little eyes and nostrils. If you want to, you can also add to the eyes a little bit. You can make 2 little balls. So I'm just gonna roll out 2 little balls, and I do them at the same time so I can make them the same size. If I do them separate, it's really hard to make them the same size. So these are just super teeny, teeny, teeny balls of clay. We can stick those in the eye sockets. So we're gonna give him some bigger eyes here. And then we can roll out a little tiny coil and put it across his brow, like some eyebrows. And sometimes that can make him a little bit more angry or serious. So eyebrows are really fun to play with for expressions too. And these are just really teeny, 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 tiny coils. So I'm taking just a super teeny piece of clay, I'm rolling it out pretty darn thin. And then there's different things you can do with this. We can give him 1 eyebrow right across like that. We can give him 2 little eyebrows that point down and make him look a little bit angry. So let's try doing that. Let's give him 1 eyebrow like that, 1 eyebrow like that. And then we can use the pointy end of our stick here to give him a little bit of a pupil. So I'm going to imagine that my sea serpent's kind of like a snake, and his pupils are kind of go down like that. They're not round like humans. My sea serpent has long pupils. So here's what our little face is looking like. So what else might an imaginary sea serpent have? I think that my sea serpent is going to have some scales and things on his back here. So I'm going to use some of my scraps again. Just wadding up my scraps. And I'm going to smash them out pretty flat again. So we're about that thick. And I'm going to go back to using either my pointy stick here or a paper clip. Either one works just fine. And I'm going to cut some triangle shapes that are attached. So it's going to look like this. So this is going to look a little bit like you might imagine a dinosaur or something. So it looks like a little mountain range, something like that. So it's 3 triangles that are attached. I'm going to even off the bottom. And then just like before, I'm going to use my little bit of water here on my finger. I'm going to get this wet, and I'm going to put this right here. So we're going to work that on there. And like with the ears, I'm going to pinch these so they look a little bit thinner than they really are. They're going to be thick down here where they attach to his body, but I'm going to pinch the ends so they look like they're a little bit more thin. So I'm pinching these. And then I'm going to use my stick again, and I'm just going to go in here, and we're gonna blend again. I'm dragging some of the clay from the scales down onto the body, and we want to do that until we don't see a line anymore. I want to make sure it's all blended on there so it'll stay on. And you kind of smooth that out again, finger in water, smooth that out a little bit. What else might a sea serpent have? How about some little wings? Is this going to be a flying sea serpent? We can give him some little wings right here. So we take a little bit more clay, just tear off a little bit of our scraps. And again, I'm going to pat that flat. And cut out just a little bit of a wing here. So my wing looks about like that, just a very small wing. I'm going to lay it on top of my scrap so I can trace over it, so both of the wings are the same size. Okay, so now we have 2 little wings for our sea serpent. All right, 2 little wings. I'm gonna attach the skinny spot right there, so he's gonna have some little wings like this. So same thing, I'm gonna get the part that's gonna be attached, I'm gonna get it wet and attach it right here. I'm gonna use this end of the stick. And we're gonna blend that on there so it stays on. And then I'm gonna squeeze the edges thin again. So it's gonna look like it's thinner than it really is. We're gonna kind of make an illusion, the illusion that it's thinner than it really is. So there's one of our wings. Put some water on the other wing here and blend our other wing in. Gonna pinch that one a little bit thinner. If you want to, you can rest the wings on the paper toilet roll there while they dry. So far, we have a sea serpent head. We've got some scales and some wings. So that's looking pretty sea serpent-y. So if you want to, something else, you can make this shape and you can use it for a paintbrush holder. It's another little possibility. You can take anything round and roll it right here and make little indentations like that. And then if you like to make a lot of art projects and paint, later you can use it to be a paintbrush holder. So I'll show you what some of these look like when they're done. This is our little guy in progress. Here's one that I made yesterday. So this guy's a little bit more firm. So here's a little guy, same thing, he's got some little nostrils, a forked little tongue, some eyebrows, and you can see what his back looks like there. I didn't give this one wings, but you can see the little indentations, so he can be a paintbrush holder. And I have one from a class a long time ago that I made with some kids a while ago. After they're painted, he might look something like this. Any color you want. This guy's got some little yellow wings on here, and you can see he's got the little indentations for a paintbrush. So when they're done, you can use them for something like this kind of paintbrush here. When you're painting, you can lay your paintbrushes just like that. So that's our sea serpent project. It doesn't have to be a paintbrush holder. It can be anything that you want out of your imagination. Have fun with that, and hey, send me a picture when you're done.